Ahoy, everyone. Wyatt Claypool here, and we are back on the whiteboard today to talk about where the polls sit nationally between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Because we have been seeing a major shift back towards the Conservatives as the summer has ground on. Back in June, the Liberals were actually doing quite well. It looked like a solid honeymoon period for them, and maybe they're actually going to be able to end the honeymoon still doing quite well in the polls. The honeymoon period is kind of that artificial period right after an election where people are willing to artificially think nice things about whoever was elected. And then over time, people kind of make up their real minds about them. They could start to think a little bit less of the government, and they could even start liking them even more if they start doing a lot of good stuff. But Mark Carney and the Liberals have really not accomplished much of anything, and they have stumbled on many, many fronts. So I want to walk you guys through some of the major pollsters. Some of them I like, some of them I don't even like, but we will show the change in their numbers over time. Because even with a bad pollster, you can still see a momentum shift. But before we get into the numbers, guys, I just want to remind you, if you like the show, make sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you are not yet a subscriber. Around 50% of anyone watching the videos usually isn't yet subscribed. And then also leave a comment on what you think about things. I do like to scroll through and see what people are saying. Plus, selfishly enough, comments do help us on the algorithm on YouTube. Anyways, we will get right into it. We will start off with Research Co at the top. I'm going to go through what these pollsters had the Liberals and Conservatives around the June July period, and then I'm going to be jumping ahead to their most recent numbers. And so let's start out with Research Co. This was one that really surprised me, and you'll see why once we get to the current numbers. But the last numbers that we saw out of Research Co. compared to other than the most recent ones, but the previous last numbers had put the Liberals at a very good 47%. That is definitely not something that you are dissatisfied with if you are Mark Carney and the Liberals. And the Conservatives at the time, this is back in like the early July, had 37%. It was a 10-point lead for the Liberals. Now let's jump down to Leger. Leger, also early July, had the Liberals at 48%, and we had the Conservatives at that time doing even worse than Research at just 35% in their poll. Jump down then to Nanos. Nanos back then had the Liberals at 45%, so a lower overall total for the Liberals, but they again are not very nice to the Conservatives at all. This is an even lower rating for the Conservative Party at only 33%. Then we have Main Street. Main Street's last poll in this period also had Liberals, like with Research, at 47, and we had the Conservatives at 38%. I would say this looked like a more realistic pollster back at this time. And again, this is the honeymoon period. This is what voters tend to do right after a government is elected. There is a bit of the bandwagoning effect. Everyone pretends they voted for the winner a little bit. You have conservatives less likely to pick up the phone. The samples start to get thrown off a little bit. Some pollsters also don't correct for who you voted for in the last election. So sometimes these pollsters soon after the election will be like 52% people voting in the poll voted Liberal in the last election, even though in Canada only 43% of people voted Liberal. So then you have the numbers really thrown off with a massive response bias for the Liberals. A response bias is basically when there is a particular group of people, either a party supporters, or it could even just be geographically or occupation based, being more or less likely to pick up the phone. Rural voters, notoriously hard to get on the phone to answer a poll. Guys who are plumbers, electricians, trades workers, typically not going to pick up the phone and even take a 30-second poll. If you work for the government or you work in a job where it's more part-time or you're an older voter, you are more likely to be able to take a poll. You also tend to get a lot of Zoomer people taking polls because they sign up for tons of online polls. Or again, you're younger, you probably have less responsibilities. You can take a poll where it's actually that kind of middle-aged rural demographic that is least likely to actually take a poll, which always sucks for the conservatives because that is who the conservatives rely on for a lot of votes. But let's finish up here with innovation. They had the liberals at their lowest marks in this earlier part of the year, 43% to the conservatives, 38%. This is also why I do like innovative. That's a pretty realistic number, a +5 result for the conservatives or for the liberals in this one. But now let's jump over to what the numbers look like as of recently for all of these pollsters. So now in September here, in the Research Co poll, we now have the Liberals dropping by 4 points, down to 43% in their most recent poll that just released yesterday, I believe. And the Conservatives had gained a point up to 38%, which is a very good gain for them, considering the overall swing here is now +5 for the Conservatives. The polls moved 5 overall points towards the Conservatives, 4 away from the Liberals, 1 towards the Conservatives. Someone's calling me. I don't know why people call me in the middle of my filming. That should be illegal. If I was running Canada, the whiteboard videos would be sacred and you wouldn't be allowed to call me during them. But now let's move over to Leger. The most recent Leger poll has Liberals having fallen 1 point down to 47%, but they have the Conservatives having gained 3 points, going up to 38%. Afterwards, I'm also going to go down and calculate out all the swings, and then we will see what the sort of average swing has been across all the pollsters in just a couple of months, because this encapsulates right now the Air Canada fiasco. It incorporates the trade fiasco, all the issues around like the bloated budgets, the Gary Amasangari being exposed as the public safety minister with a Tamil Tiger past, which is a terrorist group in Sri Lanka. We have all the stupid garbage going on. No budget yet. You have the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, not being replaced yet because they don't actually want financial transparency. So that is being captured here. And now with Nanos, the most recent Nanos poll, this one is surprising to me because this is not a pollster I like, and I still don't like them. But just the swing in their poll is quite incredible. We've had the Liberals go from 45 to 42, and the Conservatives going up to 35%. Because this was even a pollster that basically didn't even react around the Air Canada thing. The sign of a bad pollster is when it barely moves when a big event happens. Like, let's say you get caught in a scandal. A politician gets caught in a drug scandal. The leader of a major party is caught doing something stupid, and a week later, a poll comes out from a pollster, and the polls have not moved at all. And there's no real reason why people wouldn't have reacted harshly. It just didn't react. It's like, you probably have a sample that is way too partisan. These are not average voters. These are hardcore supporters of each party. The poll is too opt-in, and so the people opting in are the people who will never change their minds ever. These are Laura Babcock liberal supporters, and that's it. But that was good. The Liberals fell by 3, and the Conservatives gained 2. So that's another 5-point swing there. Main Street, this was a big tightening for the Conservatives. Remember, this is just a couple-month period. The Liberals went all the way down to just 42%. So regardless of what happens to the Conservatives, that's already a 5-point swing. And the Conservatives ended up actually jumping up to 40%, which means that they are now only separated by 2 points, which is within the margin of error. So in theory, that could mean the Liberals are still up by 4 points, but also could mean that they are within a tie. And now the last one we have to mark down is Innovative Research. Their last one was a little bit further back, I believe. Oh, come on. Can I not find this thing? I think I remember what that poll result was. I think what we had there, because for some reason it's not on 338 Canada, the Liberals went to 41, and the Conservatives had gone up to 39. Oh my goodness, Wyatt, how about you finish your work and you actually write down the 1 there? So yeah, this is where we've seen things move. And part of it, I think, is just the honeymoon ending. People are starting to have more realistic opinions about the government. And I think it's also just been that the liberal government hasn't taken the opportunity of having everyone artificially on their side for a bit and used it to do anything. And the fact that we're seeing all of these firings, we just had David Lametti get fired from the prime minister's office, the former awful justice minister that took over for Jody Wilson-Raybould. I've heard the man is a complete political psychopath, cold as a lizard and as ambitious as Lucifer. So if I can give Mark Carney credit for anything, he did get rid of David Lametti, or at least he made David Lametti's a living hell to the point that David Lametti left. Obviously, I still do not like Mark Carney, but we then have these 5 Liberal MPs planning on resigning from office, either in the near future or maybe within the next year. People like Nate Erskine Smith, who's a young man for politics, but he's leaving because him and Carney don't get along, and he'd rather go and try and lead the Ontario Liberals, most likely. You have Freeland, who again is not really old by Canadian politics standards. She's in her 50s. You can be in Canadian politics really until your early 70s before someone's maybe going to try and push you to step out of office. And she's leaving because she probably doesn't get along with Carney. She was even calling a lot of his Trudeau era ideas around economics gimmicky. She did not like his GST tax freeze and all of his other spending plans that ended up embarrassing her into having to release this $62 billion deficit last year at a time when she was supposed to be trying to keep the deficit within $40 billion. That was all because of the suggestions of Mark Carney that Trudeau forced her to implement. And it seems like after winning the election, she doesn't really want to stick around too much longer. And then you all also have Bill Blair probably going to leave, Jonathan Wilkinson also probably going to leave, and then Stephen Guilbeault, because although Mark Carney is obviously a very green energy subsidy, like crazy green energy guy when it comes to disliking oil and gas and not wanting pipelines, but because he's not as radical as Stephen Guilbeault, because Stephen Guilbeault probably didn't like that the EV mandate got paused, Stephen has either probably been suggested to him or on his own, he just wants to go because he no longer fully fits in. Now, again, this is not the Liberal Party moderating. This is just not them radicalizing as fastly as Stephen Guilbeault would want. But what we can see here is that we had a 4-point drop at the top in research for the Liberals, and we had a 1-point gain for the Conservatives, meaning that this was a +5 CPC swing. Next poll down there, Leger, Liberals lost 1, Conservatives gained 3. That is a +4 swing for the Conservatives. Nanos here, we had a 3% drop for the Liberals, 2% gain for the Conservatives. Main Street, we had 5% fall for the Liberals, and we had a 2% gain for the Conservatives, meaning it is a +7% swing for the Conservatives. Innovative Research, we had a 2% drop for the Liberals, and we had a 1% gain for the Conservatives, but this one has always been a more conservative poll, not in terms of ideology, but their numbers have been a little bit more slower to move since the last election. So that is a 3% gain. I was going to include Abacus here. I just ran out of room. I know their latest poll showed the Liberals pop back up by 3 points. That's a complicated subject. It's not because the Liberals gained ground. It's because they usually release a poll every couple of weeks. And then they released a poll, and then 5 days later, they released another poll, mostly because they wanted to do issue-based polling. And I think they didn't really care what their sample was in that poll, because typically they try and keep their sample to be reflective of the last election. They have 43% of respondents who voted Liberal last time, 41 Conservative, 6% NDP, and then they'll have a portion of people who didn't vote as a portion of the likely people who might vote in an election but aren't completely, didn't vote but are not completely opposed to voting. They'll usually mix some of those people in. And I think that that's what happened, is that they went from +3 Liberal to +2 Conservative, back to +3 Liberal, and I don't think that was an actual shift in public opinion back. I think it was just a weaker sample that time, so that's what threw off those numbers. Because some people accuse me of like, why you didn't talk about abacus? Are you scared of abacus's numbers? No. Plus, again, there is missability in polls. Polls are an art; they are not a science. You can never get the exact right people to take the poll. Some people could lie and say I voted conservative last time, and now I like the liberals just because it maybe makes the conservatives look bad. Not too much of that goes on, but within a margin of error, maybe the conservatives slip back to just being tied with the liberals from a +2 to tie. I don't think the liberals took the lead again, but we will see next time Abacus releases a poll. But yeah, so this is pretty bad for the liberals overall. So we've had 5, 4, 5, 7, and 3. We would say the average swing here has probably been 5% or 4.5 towards the conservatives in just a couple month period. This is not cherry picking a poll. This is going through all of the major polls and showing the conservatives universally gaining. In fact, it's mostly just the liberals losing. If we went back through here and we looked at the NDP's numbers, no doubt the NDP on average has picked up 2.5 points in the polls, going from 6 to around 8 or 9%. Now, again, I don't like a lot of these polls. Nanos is not a great pollster, in my opinion. They do very good work within the writ period, but for some reason, after the election is over, they go to a cheaper version of polling where they do only 250 people polled per 3 days and some online rolling poll. And it tends to, like, you can see they're polling right after the election. It's very tight, very tight. After the election, liberals leading by like 14 points. And look, right now, they have the liberals leading by like, what is it, 9 points or something like that. Back in the day, it was like 13 points they are leading, and now it's 9. Again, I think it's still a very oh no, I'm looking at Leger there. Same thing with Leger, but you get my point. You got a 12% lead for the liberals here with Nanos, and now over here you have only a 7% lead. Quite a bit of a swing there. So, anyways, thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope that you do find the numbers encouraging, that not all Canadians are crazy. Many people who voted Liberal, it was just the moment. Oh, we got to fight back against Trump, elbows up. Once you actually see the policies, you're going to get that marginal voter start to be like, we made a mistake. And then they'll kind of walk it back. Again, politics is done along the margins. You don't need to win half of the current Liberals' current vote and bring them over to voting for the Conservatives to be able to win the next election. What you need to be able to do is just win a few points. If we take, let's just say, Main Street as the current pollster, Liberals beat the Conservatives by 2.3% in the election in terms of the popular vote. If we take this as the true state of Canadian politics right now, 42 to 40. Remember, the Conservatives only lost the actual minority. They would have won the election and gotten a minority government if they just had 8,000 more votes in the closest ridings. So even if the Conservatives just gain literally 1% here and the Liberals presumably lose one, and it's 41 to 41, the Conservatives would win that election. The Conservative vote has become much more efficient. Remember 2021 and 2019? Conservatives win popular vote, but they still don't win as many seats as the Liberals, because the Conservative vote used to be so bound up in the West. Because frankly, back then, I don't think Conservative strategists knew who their base was. Even now, I don't think they know who they are. I think Polyev generally knows who they are. It's working class people who don't like liberal political culture anymore. It's not just people who support oil and gas and guns and are pro-free market. It can be old union voters in Windsor who will come and vote Conservatives, people in Hamilton, people in the GTA who don't like all the crazy anti-Semitism of the Liberal Party and the NDP. They will come over and vote Conservative. Chinese voters in both Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, and Richmond in British Columbia, they're voting Conservative because they don't like crime and drugs. They are crime and drug voters. Women are crime voters. They are family voters. So if the Conservatives want to win women, you have to have a stronger even have a softly pro-life policy, because I know people will always argue with me in the comments being like, no, if the Conservatives run pro-life, they'll lose. Well, they've never run pro-life and they've never won. So I don't really know the argument there. But if you actually look at polling on abortion practices, if you just said we're going to ban sex selective abortion, extreme late term abortion, maybe you're not going to gain women voting for the conservatives. But what you're going to do is have a lot of people realize, oh my goodness, the liberals are in favor of sex selective abortion. They won't vote to ban it, even though the conservatives have been proposing it. They will defect from the liberals. Maybe not voting conservatives. They'll maybe just stay home because that kind of grosses them out. And the thing is that, especially financially secure older voters, in which a lot of you are, probably know people, because if you're watching this channel, you're voting conservative. But you probably know people who they don't really care about the economy because they own their own home, they live in a safe part of town. Those are the voters where you need to run on a parental rights platform. You might have already had your kids move out and they have their own kids, but those people care about their grandkids. And if you run on a pro parental rights platform, they'll show up for that. Run on getting the crazy sex ed curriculums out of schools, or you'll pull federal funding from those districts. Do stuff like that. You will do better. So yeah, this is really, when you look at how close some of these elections are, yeah, Nanos is still way out there because it's just a bad sample that they put out, but it's still changing towards conservatives. But if you're even in an innovative research type election, 41 to 39, or if you're even in the research co election, 43 to 38, that's a winnable race with just a tightening up between, if the liberals here lost 3 points and the conservatives gained 3 points, they would easily win that election. This is how razor thin Canadian politics, or all politics, can really be in what is effectively a two-party system. Anyways, so that should be it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, do all that great stuff. Recommend the show to a friend. I don't know, maybe you don't even like the show, but you want to bore them to death, and you'll think this will make them fall asleep at the wheel while they're trying to drive home. But hopefully that's not your opinion and you've made it this far because you actually like the show. Anyways, well, that should be it for me today, guys. See you all later.